Well, in Kansas City, we are unfortunately trending towards a record year for homicides in this town. It's going to be close as to whether or not we break the record. Nobody wants to, but we got 129 year to date on the most recent numbers I'm looking at here. This is through August 25th, so it's got to be updated. In 2020, our worst year on record, we were at 130 year to date. So it's a problem, and we know the problem as well is targeted at young people. And you know, the answers here locally from city officials is tied to guns and what are we doing about that and homeless issues and housing issues and things of that nature. Well, Dr. Currie Myers, he is America's criminologist. He joins us on KCMO Talk Radio. And one factor that, according to Currie, is not getting talked enough about is social media and its impact. Dr. Myers, good morning. Thanks for joining us on KCMO Talk Radio. I have not heard this theory explained anywhere at all. What is it?
Well, thanks for being on. It's great to especially be on my hometown radio show, so thank you so much. I'm concerned about the chronic use of social media. That's a gateway to the dark psychological traits. Anything that we do in moderation, of course, is fine, but when we become all-consuming, and we live in, quite frankly, an all-consuming environment right now with what we do, the chronic use of that media can again take us to a place that we really don't want to be, and the internet and mob activity in particular are two particular social contagions that we're seeing right now that helps aid us as humans into those dark psychological traits.
So, Currie, is it the beef between young people that starts on social media and then filters over to the real world, or is it kind of mob mentality that then results in crime happening in different manners, or is it a combination of both?
Well, I think it's a combination of both. If you look at the research, and on my Substack, drcurriemyers.substack.com, I write often. I wrote about the advent of feral man. I wrote about this particular article, and I cite references and sources whenever I write. They're hyperlinked, so you can look and see what those sources are. But the research right now shows that especially people displaying the dark traits tend to be male and younger. They're motivated by power, using sex as a tool, and they have an overconsumption, and that, coupled with the lack of compassion, empathy, and consciousness, is developing into what's called the dark tetrads. That is antisocial behavior, and it's usually formed as a result of Machiavellianism, narcissism, and certain psychopathies that occur. If you think of the psychopathies, think of the 7 deadly sins or over abuse of the 7 deadly sins. And then you throw sadism on top of that, which is the enjoyment of cruelty. And we have young people running around that are all consumed by that. And in that study, it showed that people that tend to display those dark traits have a higher level of suicidal ideation. And in particular, the internet trolling is linked to dark tetrad traits, particularly sadism. So when you think of sadism, you might think of physical attack on people, but you can have a mental attack on people. And there's, as you know, probably from your use of internet, and people attack you for what you say and believe, might have sometimes the same things. I have a tendency to use social media to get in and get out, and just post things that I'm doing as opposed to interact. But there are a lot of people on the internet that actually get in and attack people and probably do things that they would never do if they're meeting somebody one-on-one. Yeah. And then the interesting part is mob mentality is a great hiding place for the dark psychological traits, because it perpetuates de-individuation, group identity, group acceptability. You can be anonymous. You can have diffusion of responsibilities in these mobs. And I think that's one of the reasons that we're seeing mob crime spike like never before. I mean, my goodness, I worked in law enforcement for 24 years, and in my career as the sheriff of Johnson County, and I've never seen criminality in mobs the way that we're seeing now. And then you couple that, quite frankly, with drug abuse and gang activity and social disintegration and inadequate law enforcement and justice systems, and we have horrible criminal justice public policy right now that, as you said earlier in your intro, that's being done by elected officials. It's a perfect storm for criminal activity, and I'm forecasting it's not going to get any better.
Currie Myers is on KCMO, as you just heard him note, several years in Johnson County as the sheriff, also America's Criminologist. Find him on Substack as well. So what would you tell, local politicians? You know what's happening on the other side of the state line in Kansas City, Missouri, and Jackson County right now. If social media, if I had my druthers, I would ban social media for those under the age of 18. But barring that, what can local officials do if social media is continuing to play a prevalent role in young people and, the violence that we're seeing across the country, but specifically in our area?
Well, I think there's some important issues that can be done. I don't think it can be fixed by the government. In fact, if the government gets involved in trying to fix something, usually it tends to be an abridgment to freedom of speech, because who's going to be the arbiter of what is bad and good? That's the problem. We know that there's bad on the internet. That's certainly the case. But I think to address the issue,
we don't let people under 18 watch porn, right? So why wouldn't we apply that to social media if we have proof that young people's minds are not developed to handle it?
That is true, but I think you can still get to that porn. It's not locked down to the point where young people can't view it, at least online.
Yes. No, that's right.
So you have that. So I think promoting digital literacy, I don't dispute the fact that there should be some laws in place for juveniles to be able to access this information, but how is that done? Because right now, supposedly it's done. I think Missouri has just taken a step that you have to actually put in your date of birth or something like that on porn sites, which is a good step. But somebody potentially could put in a fake date of birth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another step. And right now we're one step away from hardcore pornography, whereas before, 20 years ago, you'd have to go down to some shop, off I-70, 50 miles from town to be able to view some of those things. So I think ultimately social media boundaries start at home. And I'm a big believer the influence or the disintegration of faith, family, and formation are the main causals for why we're in the social contagion that we're in. I think for public officials, we have to focus on violent crime, especially criminals that reoffend. Recidivism is still at a high level. About 63% of offenders that get out in violent crime will reoffend. It spikes to 71% in 5 years. If you're under the age of 25, it's 80%. I think we have to fund criminal justice organizations appropriately. We've seen a defunding of police, and a lot of people say, well, we've increased budgets, but we've decreased manpower, and a decrease in manpower is a defunding movement. It's very difficult for us to hire police officers right now, to retain police officers. We have police officers leaving in droves, and it's because we've had bad public policy. We're not enforcing the law, and when you don't enforce the law, there's no carrot and stick. We have nothing but carrots. We reward people who are the offenders by having carrots instead of a carrot and stick philosophy. And we need to go to evidence-based policing concepts that uses technology and current crime data. Most of our crime data, Pete, is historic.
Mm-hmm.
We're operating off old information. And I've made the argument that we have, in law enforcement, we should have key performance indicators just like the business world. And it allows us to direct resources in the appropriate way. And then the other thing that nobody wants to talk about is black-on-black violent crime and victimization is at a all-time level. If you look at the data in most urban areas, about 70% of the violent crime homicides that occur are occurring to people of color. And unfortunately, almost the same amount are the suspects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so
all true.
Crime starts at home.
Yeah,
and we've had this disintegration of the family, but that's been a slow usurpation that's been going on for several decades now.
Currie Myers, America's Criminologist, right here in town, retired Johnson County Sheriff. Currie, great to have you on. We'll do it again soon. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure. Have a good one.
You as well. Currie Myers on KCMO Talk Radio.